We are back at it today with our notes. We've already gone over day one with our reflexive verbs. So now we're going to get a little bit more information, things that are going to be a little bit more complicated. So make sure that you are jotting down any questions that you have and really processing through this information as you watch this video. I will tell you that I've changed the PowerPoint a little bit from what the notes you have down, so I might ask you to jot some things down in the margin or there's some space down below, but it will truly be for your benefit. All right, first things first, we're going to talk about double verb constructions with our reflexive verbs and kind of how they fit in. But I feel like in order to do that, we first need to review our double verb constructions. So at this point, you should be comfortable with all of those phrases. If you're not, you might want to jot them down towards the bottom or revisit your double verb construction notes. That's all the way back from first quarter, so hopefully you still have those. If you do, you might want to pull those out and keep them near as we go through this lesson. So let me quickly go over what these verbs mean. Remember, tener que means that you have to do something. I que just means one must do something. Acabar de you use when you have just done something. Ir plus a means you're going to do something. Remember, gustar, anytime that we say I like to do something, you're going to use the infinitive. Querer means to want. Deber means should. Pensar means when you've got it with a verb that immediately follows, means that you plan to do something. Necesitar means to need. And preferir means to prefer. So hopefully you're comfortable with those. If not, then I would spend some time reviewing them. So, what do our reflexive verbs look like with our double verb constructions? Well, really, we've got two options of how we can fit these reflexive verbs in with these double verb constructions. Now, they're different, but they're both 100% accurate. So it's really more of personal preference of what you feel most comfortable with. And I think that will make more sense as I go along and explain. Okay, one option, and this goes along with your notes, one option is to attach the reflexive pronoun to the infinitive when immediately followed by another verb. So remember, our double verb constructions, when two verbs go skating, the first one does the conjugating, the second one stays in the infinitive form. So let's look at that. Think about that definition and look at the example. So we attach the reflexive pronoun to the infinitive when it's immediately followed when we have a double verb construction. So let's look at the example. A mí me gusta acostarme. Since I'm saying that I like to fall asleep, or to go to bed, that we still have to change our reflexive pronoun to agree with the subject. So that's why we changed that acostar to me. That's why we changed that to me. And notice it's attached at the end. Does that make sense? So take a look at these three sample problems, and I want you to try to put that together. What would te gusta, what would to take a shower look like? Think about who your subject is and what your reflexive pronoun would be based on that subject. So go ahead and hit pause, and let's see how you do. All right. For number one, your first one should be te gusta ducharte. Again, notice duchar is in the infinitive, and then we changed our reflexive pronoun, and it's still just attached at the end. Oops. Our next one, Miguel is our subject, so it would be secarse. And then who's our subject for number three? If you said nosotros, because it's queremos, we know our subject, even though it doesn't say nosotros, we know it is nosotros because our conjugation of our verb is queremos. So then it would be levantarnos. So that's one way you can form these double verb constructions. Now the next slide is not on your notes, so I would recommend that you either jot it down in the margin or maybe down towards the bottom, wherever you can find some space. So another option is to place the reflexive pronoun in front of the first conjugated verb when there's a double verb construction. So let's look at that example. Os debéis duchar. So instead of attaching that os at the end of duchar, we can put it at the very beginning, right before our first conjugated verb. So, I want you then to look at these three example sentences. Oops, sorry. There we go. Look at these three example sentences. And how would you form these sentences using this way of our double verb construction with our reflexive verbs? So go ahead and hit pause and let's see how you do. All right. We know that for number one, our reflexive pronoun is going to be te because our subject is tú. So, tú te vas a duchar. Number two, we know Miguel is our subject, so our reflexive pronoun is going to se, and then it would be secar. So, Miguel se necesita secar. And then finally, number three, we know that our subject is nos, or nosotros, so it would be no nos queremos levantar. Again, either one of those are equally correct. It's just personal preference, what one you feel most comfortable with. But that being said, you should be comfortable being able to identify both of those in a reading or perhaps a listening. We also have some different rules when we're using prepositional phrases with our reflexive pronouns. I'm going to move myself back down here. Whoop. Okay. So we never conjugate verbs after prepositional phrases such as para, antes de, and después de. So whether the verb is reflexive or not, we do not conjugate the verb after para, antes de, or después de. But of course, we still have to change our reflexive pronoun, but we have to leave it attached at the end of the infinitive. There is no option with this. It has to be attached at the end of the infinitive. So, yo necesito un peine para peinarme el pelo. Again, we've got para here, so our verb that follows is going to be in the infinitive. Antes de bañarse, ella prepara la ropa. So again, notice antes de bañarse, and it's se because our subject is ella. And finally, después de ducharte, usas una toalla. Again, we know that usas is in the to form, so that's why we know that it is ducharte. You might want to underline those subjects like I did in the example to help you out with your notes. And then this is something that's very minor, but it will really separate a non-native speaker, like a Spanish language learner, and kind of making that transition to trying to fit in with the native speakers. So when we use the reflexive verb with a part of the body, then we use the definite pronoun as opposed to the possessive adjective. So for example, in English, we say she brushes her teeth more often than not. So in Spanish, that would translate to ella se cepilla sus dientes. But in Spanish, we don't do that. We say ella se cepilla los dientes. And here's the reason why. Since our verb is reflexive, we know that the person doing the action and receiving the action are the same. So it seems redundant in Spanish to use the possessive adjective, sus. So why don't you go ahead, I think there are 3 problems. So why don't you go ahead and try those 3 sentences. How would we say your hair, your face, or my hands? But again, we have to use that definite article. Alright, here you go. If you said el pelo, la cara, and las manos, then you've got this down. Again, it's something that's very minor, but yet it really separates the language learner to someone that's becoming more accurate and more towards a native speaker. So those are all of the notes that I have for you. Please make sure that you come to class with any questions. We're going to do practice like we did with our day 1 verbs, and we'll go from there. Thanks, guys. Luego.